chancellor at a Kenyan university, was saying not just president of, first African-American president of the United States, but first black president in the Western world. And he was taking it global, saying, so when will we have? And what will this mean? It will mean many more steps towards a black prime minister in Britain, or a black French president, or a black chancellor of Germany, he said. He said that might come last, but still, he said, think about that. And watching the Obama family go to the White House was truly amazing. I mean, here you had Barack Hussein Obama with his wife, Michelle LaVaughn Robinson Obama. She is a descendant of slaves. Her grandfather came up from South Carolina in the Great Migration north, ended up in Chicago. He a descendant of slaves, so their children, Malia and Sasha, descendants of slaves. And so you have the first African-American presidential family living in the White House, the most famous house on earth, built by slaves. Yes, there have been significant breakthroughs in this country with its legacy of slavery. Can President Obama redeem the White House? Well, I actually don't think that's up to him. I think that's up to all of you. I mean, what's happened right now, I think, is that for many years, people have been hitting their heads against a brick wall. Now that wall has become a door, and that door is open a crack. The question is, will it be kicked shut or kicked wide open? That depends on people outside, not inside the White House. That's going to be depending on what you do at this moment. There is no more important moment than now. Now, this historic election in so many ways, millions more people got involved in the elections in the United States. Millions of young people, 67% of Latinos voted for Barack Obama, 95% of African Americans, 70% of single women, it seems to be a new voting bloc, voted for Barack Obama. Millions gave small amounts of money. Now, Barack Obama opted out of public campaign financing, which could be a major problem in this country because many could see right now that what we're seeing on Wall Street and the global economic meltdown might result directly from our campaign finance laws or our lack of campaign finance laws determining who gets in office. So he spent more money than any presidential candidate in history. He raised it in several ways. One was from millions of people giving small amounts of money. And then there were the small groups of individuals and corporations that gave millions of dollars. Who wins out? The ones who are used to talking to the president, whoever that president is in the White House, they are used to walking the West Wing, having the ear of the most powerful leader on earth. The ones who, when they whisper, they respond. But what about if they whisper and Obama says, but if we do that, pointing outside the window, they will storm the Bastille. But what if there's no one out there to point to? Sometimes it's going to be organizing he wants because he can't do it alone. And sometimes it's going to be organizing he doesn't want. But he was the example, the community organizer extraordinaire. As Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand. Speaking of whom, let's go to the eastern shore of Maryland, to where Frederick Douglass was born, the greatest abolitionist in American history, the man who was enslaved as a boy and a teenager on the eastern shore. And because it shouldn't surprise you, he was a troublesome slave. He was handed over to a slave breaker, a man who was known for breaking slaves. His name was Edwin Covey. And there in a place called St. Michael's was Edwin Covey's property. He tortured Frederick Douglass. He beat Frederick Douglass, but Frederick Douglass broke away, headed north and change the world. And it's important to point out he started his own newspaper, media, the most powerful institutions on earth, more powerful than any bomb, more powerful than any missile. We have to take back the media. It is the place where social change can begin, where people can hear what other people are doing so people can link up, connecting the dots in this country and around the world. He understood this more than a century ago, how important it was to provide a forum for people to be heard. The property that Edwin Covey owned, where he tortured Frederick Douglass and other enslaved human beings, was called Mount Misery. That property today is owned by Donald Rumsfeld. It's his vacation home. He bought it in 2003 to be near his close friend, Vice President Dick Cheney, who lives down the road. Now, I have told the story, I think I might have even told it at the last Seattle Greenfest, but I did feel, even though I had researched it well, that it was really hard to believe that this was true. That very place is owned by Donald Rumsfeld today. And so I headed to St. Michael's to investigate as a journalist with my own eyes. And we drove to St. Michael's, and I thought, how am I going to find out where Donald Rumsfeld, then the Secretary of Defense, lives? And I saw an organic coffee shop, and I thought, oh, they'll tell us the truth. So let me just get a little of my Nika Java here. So they said, oh, yeah, you just go out back, you drive down the road, and you'll see Mount Pleasant. Don't go down that road. You make a left, and then you make a right, and that's Mount Misery Road. You see, that was the name of Edwin Covey's property, Mount Misery. So we drove down the road. We didn't go down Mount Pleasant. We drove to Mount Misery Road, and there at the end I could see the black tinted windows of the black SUVs, knew that's the Secret Service, and this is where Donald Rumsfeld lives. So I got out with my little video camera and I started filming, and of course the Secret Service started coming out, but not before I was able to hone in with that camera on a stake in the ground. If you have any illusions about perhaps Mr. Rumsfeld doesn't know where he lives, the stake in the ground says Mount Misery. I went over to this very old African-American church. It was Sunday morning in this very rural area, and we drove up, and I went inside. It was right before Mass, and the older folks were having a Sunday school in the sanctuary. And I asked one of the older women, well, what do you think about the fact that Frederick Douglass